All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Strictly Sports Podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, as well as YouTube, and you can always find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts. So we got a lot to get into today, primarily NFL stuff. But before we do that, we hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Around our family, there's always some good Thanksgiving stories. And one thing that we found ourselves dealing with on Thanksgiving Day was the old classic dessert that we had discussed on our top 5 lists from last week. And I know that this type of pie, I won't say the type that it is because that'll give away my view on how I feel about it. But this type of pie was discussed for the pronunciation, and you guys can probably guess which pie we're talking about. Trav?
Yeah, I was sitting around the table at our family Thanksgiving eating my pecan pie, and everybody was eating their pecan pie, the delicious Pies by Ty pecan pie. Not to be confused with pecan. And, you know, we've got conversation being had about that pie because that pie is so good and it is kind of a family favorite in our Thanksgiving. And, you know, some people are like this and this, pecan, this and, you know, oh, it's pecan. And I've run into this before. Me and my wife go at it all the time about it. She's a pecan pronouncer. I'm a pecan pronouncer. And a few others in the family were dropping the pecan. And I'm just like, all right, let's get something straight here, folks. It's pecan pie. It's not pecan, because it was just annoying me to no end that more people than just my wife were going pecan. And so me and Juddy, I think both kind of went around. We were taking a little bit of a poll. So the 4 Ferry brothers, there's 3 of us here on this podcast and another one. We're all pecan. I think my dad was pecan, but my wife, sister-in-law, and a few others were going pecan. I think we eventually got to like a 55-45 in favor of pecan, but it was pretty close. But I'm just here to say that for anybody out there who is confused, it's pecan pie, and that's just the way you say it.
Yeah, so I did some research on this just for you guys because up here in the north, we say pecan pie, and it sounds like legitimately 50% of your family knows what's up. Trav, I would also say that the person who is making all these pies, if she says it's pecan and you want to keep eating them, maybe you should listen to her.
That might be fair.
Yeah, but anyway, so I have a survey here from the National Pecan Shellers Association that says that pecan was preferred among 45% of Americans. The other 55% of Americans were split between a pronunciation of pecan and pecan, which is, I think pecan, if we all wanted to talk about, is the worst of all 3 possible pronunciations.
Agreed.
That's not even allowed.
I agree. So what I'll say to this, and I was going to say this the other day when we were talking about it, is that, Dan, from what you're telling me, that 45% is the majority. Out of the 3 things you gave us, out of pecan, and pecan, sounds like 45% makes up the pecan, and therefore the other 55% is split between the 2. So how do we know it's not 20%?
Depending on what the split between pecan and pecan is, unless it was like a 90-10 on that one, but you're making it sound like it was kind of close, so then the majority actually would be pecan.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the problem is that one of the 2 vowels is not being enunciated appropriately by you guys, whereas at least, you know, for the 55%, they recognize that one of the 2 vowels has to have some type of a proper enunciation. So you guys are making it sound like a bird.
What's the proper pronunciation of the letter E? Is it like p? No, that's a U. It's pecan.
Phonetically sound. Either,
or you can say pecan, which would be just stupid. But E is pronounced as E or E. That's just kindergarten vowel sounds for you.
Well, according to what this...
That's not a great argument, because what about the word the?
The.
Oh, yeah, it's like the.
Right, but it's...
No, according to this, the word pecan comes from, or pecan, whatever you want to say, actually comes from a Native American word, pecani, P-A-K-A-N-I, and then it evolved into an American French word, which was pecan, like pecane or something like that. But anyway, the point is we changed it how we spell it. So the reason it's pronounced that way is because the original language or the original word was P-A-C-A-N-E. So even though we changed it in our weird English language, we still say it like it was the old Native American.
Well, I think at least the one thing, we'll wrap this up with the one thing we can all agree on is that this pecan is ridiculous. That shouldn't even be allowed. If you're gonna, I respect people that, even though they're wrong, I respect the people out there saying it as pecan a lot more than pecan. At least they commit totally away from pecan, and they go like, oh no, it's mix, pecan. But at least you commit to one or the other. You're either pecan or pecan. You know, none of this hybrid sitting on the fence stuff. I think we can all agree on that.
Yep, and I'll agree with that. And you know, anybody that says pecan does not deserve a place at the table. And you know, in other news, somebody who doesn't deserve the place at the table possibly as well could be someone who is a Costas. And we had a situation like that on our own. We like to play a little bit of football on Turkey Day. We try to get the old guys out there. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. But we had a nice little game going. And there was a certain person of our podcast who really kind of blew the game for their team. So I'm gonna let Aggie kind of share his story on this.
Yeah, so as Juddy alluded to, he used the term Costas. So that is something that we use in our family as, not to be confused with Bob Costas, but it's more like Costas, as in you cost us the game. So we call you the Costas. So you never want that title because that means you really screwed up and your team would have won if it hadn't been for your poor play or, you know, some sort of debacle. Anyways, we had a good chance. We were playing just a standard 4 to score, 4 possessions each team. Go down, it's 7-0. You know, we're losing. Travis, my QB. We have a 4th down scenario where we're at the goal line on the 3rd possession where we could have tied it up 7-7 going into the last possession. And I break on a little slant route, in route. It's not there. I kind of look back over. Juddy was playing defense. He kind of shaded back to the middle to guard another guy, and I noticed that the sideline was open, so I break basically to like the front corner of the end zone. Travis sees it. He darts one in, hits me literally right in the chest, and I just drop it. So that was cost us number 1 right there.
That's 4th down.
So we would have been tied up going to the last possession. So now we're still down 7-0. Goes to the last possession. Juddy's team has the ball. Very next play, first play from scrimmage, Juddy throws one to our other brother who's not on this podcast, overthrows him a little bit, and I'm playing like behind it, playing it deep, and it literally just hits me like, I mean, I don't even know how to explain it. I had
right in the gut.
My hands out, ready for it, and it just kind of goes through my hands and drops to the ground. So there again, you know, if I make the play in the end zone and make the touchdown, it's 7-7, and then if I make that pick, we have a chance right there close in to go score and win the game. And, you know, all I can say is I've got to be better. I know that. I'm going to get my Carson Wentz or whoever else you want to be right now. I'm going to channel my inner that guy to say, you know, I have to be better.
We'll just keep working.
Got to keep grinding, keep working at it. You know, every day we're just going to get back to the grind, and we'll look forward to the next one. But, you know, I'm better than that. I know I'm better than that, and I will be better than that.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking responsibility, Aggie, for the loss of our team. For me, it's frustrating because, man, I made 2 great plays on both of the plays that you're talking about. I threw a great ball into you that you blew, and then
you blitzed.
My defense on the defensive side of the ball, I came in on a hot blitz, just a little corner hot blitz there on Juddy. Got my hands up, great pressure on the quarterback. I forced that throw. I forced that bad overthrow from Juddy, and then again I get nothing for it. So yeah, Aggie can successfully drop balls on offense and defense for everyone out there.
Yep, I'll own it, man. I played bad, and I cost my team the game. Yep.
Well, moving on from some personal Thanksgiving stories, there's a lot to get to in the NFL. So first thing we're going to touch on is the hot topic of the week, which has been the unplayed game of the Steelers versus Ravens. As we sit here on Tuesday night, where they were supposed to be playing after the Sunday reschedule from Thanksgiving, it was pushed again to Wednesday, which is tomorrow from when we're recording. So we will have some answers from that, but I did want to touch, and I kind of want to let Dan go first on what your thoughts were on the whole postponement, you know, possible favoritism that people were talking about with the Ravens, you know, getting to move the game, and like, did they have a hand in moving it, or kind of what went down with that?
So we do try to keep this strictly sports, but I mean, I guess we can't help but kind of comment on this because what I think happened here is people are like, the NFL is trying to navigate something that hasn't happened really in the history of the NFL since the modern era. And what needed to happen is a precedent needed to be set from the very beginning for the first team that this happened to. So that would have been Tennessee. And so when Tennessee had this breakout, there needed to be a precedent set so we knew how every single thing would have been governed after that. And the NFL didn't do it. So here we are with this Ravens outbreak, which is worse than any other outbreak. And they're basically just continuing to kick the can down the road, which is going to ultimately hurt the season for some teams, and especially after the latest news where they say someone was infected while they got there. Well, we still don't know if the game is going to be played on Wednesday. So ultimately, I think the NFL is put themselves in a really bad position. There's more to say about it. There's a lot of different levels to this, but I want to let other people kind of talk about it. But ultimately, I put responsibility on NFL not setting a precedent early, which has been Roger Goodell's problem since he's been commissioner, is not setting the strong precedent early. And he just wants to govern each situation differently. And I think in this situation, something this serious, they should have governed this from the beginning, and everybody else should have had to follow suit.
Yeah. Look, like you said, the NFL's in a tough spot. My whole thing is this. I know there's been a lot of complaints from Steelers fans out there about, we didn't do anything wrong and we're being punished. And I don't have a huge problem with the way the NFL has handled it, because my biggest thing is I don't want to see forfeits. Everything you can do not to see forfeits. And I know, Dan, you're talking about setting a precedent. I don't exactly know what you meant by that. I know you've alluded to the past potentially to being open to that, and if that a big outbreak happened, being open to forfeits. I'll let you get into that some more once we get a little deeper into it, but about what you specifically mean by a precedent being set. My thing is, I don't want, if you're talking about a precedent of forfeits being like, oh, if a team gets that bad of an outbreak, they just forfeit and that's it. I'm not okay with that, because there's already a loss of credibility in this season. If you put forfeits into a season, you've lost all credibility to me. So I'm all about doing everything you can to not have games forfeited. If that means adding an extra week on the end, I'm even okay with that. That being said, they're trying to do all they can not to add that extra week. So for them to keep pushing it back, I don't have a huge problem with that. I know it hurts the Steelers, but at the end of the day, I don't think the Ravens, despite I should say, some of these conspiracy theories about the Ravens wanting to catch COVID, or they're planning all this and making it worse and not wanting to play so that they can get the 8 seed, so that the extra week will cause them to get the 8 seed and the Steelers will lose out on having a bye as the 1 seed. It's like, just stop it. That's not the issue here.
Right. They're
not trying to intentionally hurt the Steelers or whatever. Like I said, the Ravens think a lot more of themselves than getting the 8 seed. They still think they're going to be better than 8 seed and get in with or without 8 teams. So my biggest issue is now in the last 2 days, it seems like they're actually giving the Ravens players, because there have been reports, and I don't know how much of this is true and how much it isn't, about how much it affected their decision to move it. Once they got moved to Tuesday, okay. And then there was reports coming out Monday that the Ravens players were not happy with having to play on Tuesday, so they weren't accepting it, whether it be because of practice or they didn't feel safe. And then that might have led the NFL to reconsider and then ultimately move it to Wednesday. You can't give the Ravens don't get a say. The NFL, their whole thing is making it about, it's not about competitive balance, right? If you have, the Broncos situation, we're not going to cancel or postpone a game for that, but we will if we don't think the outbreak is contained. This was way different than the Broncos situation, because the Broncos, every other situation other than Tennessee, like you said, Dan, the outbreaks have been contained. This is only the second one where it's so bad that we can't play the game right now. So the NFL is the decider of that, though. The Ravens don't get to decide, oh, we don't feel safe. Well, if you don't feel safe, then you don't have to play. You can forfeit the game as the Ravens if you think it's not safe. If the NFL deems it safe, now I'm not saying the NFL is the end-all be-all on this, but they get to make a decision, so that is what it is. So the end of the day, they're making the decisions, quote-unquote, for safety only, and that's fine. But the minute you let the Ravens have input, if that happened, to pushing it to Wednesday, that's where I have the problem. That's where it looks like maybe they've gotten favoritism because, oh, we need some time to practice. No, it's not about getting time to practice. If the outbreak is deemed contained, you play. And it seemed like that's what the NFL had decided for the Tuesday game, and now they push it to Wednesday. Now we hear today, as of a couple hours ago, that they had a positive test today, but they say it's not going to affect it because it was somebody who they already knew was a close contact, but yet that same report, according to Juddy, says that person practiced with them in the walkthrough today. So it sounds like they're just picking and choosing. So I will rip them a little bit for the inconsistency. But at the end of the day, I'm glad they're doing everything they can to play the games and not forfeit them. So I'm not going to criticize them too much.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say real quick, just to rebut in that, in regards to like what I'm talking about setting a precedent, is that if you're going to go out and you're going to find like the Saints for the appearance of wearing masks, the appearance of being safe, and find them $500,000 in a draft pick, but the teams that are breaking protocol noticeably, and you're not going to find them, or you're not going to like this. The Titans didn't really get any real punishment for that. That is a level of unfairness that just isn't okay. The Saints shouldn't get fined for the appearance of it, and then other teams actually break protocol and have actual outbreaks that affect the season. So what I'm saying here is, if they would have set a precedent and made a fine or a penalty for the Titans that would have let the rest of the NFL know, listen, these guys are for real, then it would have deterred other teams for thinking that maybe they could be lax with their protocol. And that's really what I'm talking about. I'm not a huge fan of forfeits either. I don't want to see that. But what I wanted to see is I want to see consistency across the board. And I feel like the Saints really got picked on in that situation. So,
well, the Saints thing was a second offense. I agree with you. I'm less worried about a mask not being worn, the appearance.
It's the appearance. They want the appearance of something.
Right. I get that,
they value that more than they actually care about these actual positive tests.
But I do think part of that was a second offense for them. Although an outbreak of 20 people is way worse than even a second offense of not wearing your mask, where there was no consequences. But
that's I guess for them, it's tested before the game in a rapid test that comes back negative, so they know they don't have COVID.
But I will say this. Let's wait and see what punishment they give the Ravens before,
I think that something will come on the Ravens, but they should have set that precedent early.
They have to do their due diligence and they have to do their investigation. Obviously, they already know that there was somebody at fault who didn't follow protocol, and he's been disciplined already by the team, so I'm sure he'll get more disciplined by the NFL as well as them as an organization. My thing, Dan, is as we wrapped up this little part, is that I'm kind of with both of you guys. Like, I just want to see consistency, and that's something we haven't seen from Roger Goodell with any punishments. You look back at suspensions from years past where some guys get 4-game suspensions for nothing, and another guy gets 1 game for something that seems that we would deem far worse. So it's kind of right up the same note with just the NFL not being consistent. I'm sure Denver would have loved, and I heard that John Elway and the Broncos did lobby to try to get that game pushed another day so they could get a quarterback back, and they didn't. They had to play with a wide receiver off the practice squad. Which, side note, Aggie, you'll find this funny. Jerry Jones on his radio show compared Ben DiNucci to Kendall Hinton, saying that him playing with a 7th-round quarterback pick was just as bad as a wide receiver who's on the practice squad. He said those were kind of his words. But as we move more into the NFL, there's some big games that were played, most notably the Chiefs-Bucks, which didn't really seem like much of a game for a lot of the way. The Chiefs were pretty much in control. The Bucks tried to make it a game a little bit later, but what did you think of that, Aggie?
Yeah, I thought early on for sure. Yeah, you just saw the Chiefs really just, impose their will on the Bucks on both sides of the ball. The defense really did a good job of holding Brady and those guys down for pretty much the whole first half. You saw them really getting after it. And on offense, Holmes and all those guys, they were just running up and down the field and just wearing out the defense in the first half. And then, like you said, later on towards the second half of the second half, like more the fourth quarter, I guess, the Bucks started making it a game, and the offense wasn't firing as much on all cylinders for the Chiefs in the second half. But at the end of the game, this is why we all had Mahomes as number 1 on our quarterback, man.
True.
How many coaches do we see that just still, no matter, even have good quarterbacks, they hand the ball off at the end. They put it in Mahomes' hands. They made him make a throw to clinch the game at the end there. That's why he's the number 1. And they did it. They were able to hold him off. Brady did a good job of trying to battle back, but, it just wasn't enough.
Yeah. I was pretty impressed with the Chiefs defense. I know the Bucks offense has already been struggling, but I continue to be impressed with the Chiefs defense this year as opposed to previous years, which makes me think that the Chiefs, are going to be even harder to beat than you would think because their offense is already as good as everybody knows. So,
They have Spagnuolo, right? Steve Spagnuolo.
Yeah, they got Spagnuolo, and he's helped clean things up. But he's been there, I think, going on a 3rd year now, and it hadn't looked as good as it has. It's just a bit more consistent this year and a lot less, having games where they just look terrible and giving up yards and points. But the question is what were the Bucks going to do? I don't think anybody expected the way the Bucks have looked the last 2 weeks. I don't think anybody expected them to go in there and win that game. But they just really look like a team that can't compete with the truly elite teams in the league. They're a decent playoff team or whatever, but they just look like a team that really can't compete with the elite teams and is barely going to make the playoffs as it is now. They're at a point now. They've got a bye week, and they've got Minnesota coming up. If Minnesota beats them, those two teams have identical records and are right there for the last playoff spot, which would, I believe, give them Minnesota the tiebreak over them head-to-head. So the Bucks better not mess around or they're going to miss the playoffs, and I still think they'll make it. But I think the bigger issue now is, like everybody talking about coming out of that game, 2 more interceptions for Brady. Is Bruce Arians, 1, is their style, or do their styles mesh well enough? And 2, what's up with all this Bruce Arians throughout the year? We haven't talked about this aspect of the Bucks at all in the podcast. What's up with Bruce Arians just seemingly kind of just almost like purposefully annoying Brady in the press conferences, taking little jabs at him, basically saying multiple times throughout the year, like, well, these plays are here, but the quarterback's just not making the plays, types of things. I don't know what's going on there. And I'll let you touch a little more in depth on that, Dan, because I know you're talking about the possible divorce coming here.
Well, I just have two questions. Like I agree with you, and this is part of the, what's going on between Brady and Arians. But I want to know, one, like in this game specifically, when you woke up and you were thinking about game planning for the Chiefs, who thought it would be a good idea to single cover Tyreek Hill? Who made that decision? Apparently. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So first of all, we got like, Mahomes is like, that's a great idea. You should probably do that, right? But that's the first thing. Like, who thought that was going to be? The second thing is, it's very noticeable that when during the game, when Arians calls New England-esque plays, and Romo talked about this, this is what makes Tony Romo so good. They were executing well. They went down the field.
Don't you think that's Brady audibling to those? I don't think Arians is calling those.
I don't know if he is or not, but Arians, if he wants his team to be successful, and wants Brady to come in and feel more comfortable with no offseason, I think that you have to lay down your pride a little bit and go to what he's more comfortable with, because we know in New England, when he had like this offense that he ran and they were successful with it, they were really good. And there was hardly a drive where they didn't go down and score, some type of point. So my big thing with that is, I think Bruce Arians during his bye weeks needs to take a deep, hard look inside of himself and say, do I want to win, or does it have to be my way to win? And if it's the second one, then this is going to be a divorce eventually. And it's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah, well, what's shocking to me is that it's been 13 weeks, and like, is he really that stubborn? Because the thing is, we all know they have the talent, they have the receivers, they have the personnel to be able to run that short game offense, but they're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Doing it. Like, is Bruce Arians really that stubborn to where he's like, you know what, I'm bigger than Tom Brady. He's like, my offense is going to work. I'm going to make him come into my scheme. It's like, you would think, come on, dude, like, he's a good quarterback. You have all the weapons. You even upgraded and got more weapons that are benefit for, like, Antonio Brown is like one of the best players at getting separation quickly. So like, you have the dogs to kind of run that quick offense, but I don't understand why they're not doing it.
Yeah. And I think we're just seeing Bruce Arians. Like, I think if there's one fault of Bruce, and maybe we're seeing this with a lot of coaches right now, right? Just this pride, man, just like having to do things their way, and like egos. And if they would just kind of put them to the side and say winning comes before like all this other stuff, I think if they went back and they did a little bit more of a short passing game in Tampa Bay, I have a feeling they'd be a lot more productive, and their defense has been exposed because they've been on the field so much. But if they're able to get some longer drives, work their way down the field and score points, a good offense can help cover up some of those defensive deficiencies.
Yeah, I think like we talked about how we had a lot of respect for the Bucs defense this season, and how like lately it's been getting worse. I think that might be because of how bad the offense has been lately, and it's been keeping the defense on the field and wearing them out.
Yeah.
Yep. And we'll have to see what happens. I mean, there's only a few games left before we start getting into the playoffs. But one of the things with Week 13 coming up that I always like to do, and I always tell Trav about this every year, is Week 13 is usually when the playoff generator comes out. So I'll be hopping on ESPN and Yahoo to start plugging and playing with all the different scenarios to see like clinching positions and who's going to play who. But
it's going to be bizarre this year too with an extra team.
Yeah, it is with 7 teams, and then who knows what's going to happen with COVID.
True, if we get 8 in there.
But one thing that's definitely going to shake it up is all the upsets we saw this week with the Raiders getting absolutely demolished by a hapless, for the most part this season, Falcons team. And then Arizona losing that close game off the field goal to the Patriots, as well as the Rams not being able to find a way to beat the Niners. So quite a few upsets that are pretty impactful for the playoff race, Trav.
Yeah, that was the big one for me was the Raiders Falcons. The Pats rising. The Pats are a good enough team with Belichick. They confuse the Cards, I think, on on the defensive side of the ball, while the Cards were on the offensive side of the ball. Belichick just kind of maybe out scheming them there. But you kind of can understand that. You can understand the Niners are still a good enough team, even with the injuries, to beat the Rams. But how do the Raiders not just lose to the Falcons, but get absolutely demolished by the Falcons? I didn't watch a ton of that game, but it doesn't matter. If you're the Raiders, man, we just gave them a bunch of credit last week on the podcast about like almost beat the Chiefs twice. They look like they really are going to be like for real enough to make the playoffs, and then you go lay that egg. That's terrible, man. And not just their defense, which is what I think is suspect, but their offense came out and did nothing against a not so great Atlanta defense. So I don't know what the Raiders are doing there. That very well may cost them the playoffs. They're not a team that can be affording to lose to a Falcons when they're fighting for their playoff lives. And I just don't understand this team week to week. They rise up, they beat the Saints, they beat the Chiefs, and then they lose some of these head scratchers, and this was like the biggest one of all. So that's just a terrible loss that really might cost them their playoff berth down the line here for the Raiders.
Yeah, that's the one for me as well, Trav. That's just like an embarrass. And the thing is, the Raiders, and we see this in NFL, but they played the Chiefs the week before. They got up for it. It probably was a tough loss for them. They controlled a lot of that game. They did everything they needed to except for score every possession. But in the week before, and then they come out here and they just lay an egg, and it's almost like they gave everything they had in the week previous. They come out here, they play against the Falcons. No Julio Jones was even in this game. You know what I mean? No Todd Gurley in this game. You just can't look like garbage like that. And I expect better out of a John Gruden coach team to come out and be better than that. I thought the other game that really shocked me was after the Rams come out, they're looking good. They beat the Bucs, and then they go and lose to San Francisco. San Francisco is now back into the playoff hunt and conversation again, which I think is interesting. We got the Cards that are kind of moving down a little bit, and the 49ers are moving up, but just surprised that the Rams couldn't get enough scoring on the board in that game and lose to a very injury-riddled 49ers team. That one really confused me. Like, how does that happen?
Well,
I thought. Go ahead, John.
I was just gonna say they did get Deebo Samuel and Richard Sherman back for that game, as well as somebody else. I don't remember who it was, but
okay.
Yeah, and I give a lot of credit to San Fran. Like, they've been beat up all year, but like the whole year they've still fought in every game. Like, they've never looked like they're going to be a team that gives up. Like, and the Rams, for me, like, I've always felt like this whole year they've kind of just been up and down. Like, we thought for a while, like, are they a fake good team because all they beat was the NFC East? Well, then they beat Seattle. They beat who did you guys say? Tampa. So we're like, okay, they're beating some good teams now. They're legit. This is the second time they lost. They lost to the Niners twice already. They got swept by San Fran now for the season. So it's like, we still don't know who they are. Are they really a quality team, or are they kind of just? But the same with the Raiders. You know what I mean? Or are we just seeing a lot of teams that are good teams but just kind of inconsistent?
Yeah, I mean, I think it tells you yes, they're up and down, but when you're up and down like that, you're probably not that good because you can be a little bit up and down and still win games if you're a really good team and not bring your best. It seems like these teams need to bring their best to win. The really good teams can bring their best.
Just like Pittsburgh, they kind of have ugly games almost every week, but you're winning.
Right, but I just think I'm with you on the Rams. It wasn't as bad as the Raiders by any means because the Niners are still a decent team, like you said, Juddy. They got a couple guys back. They're going to start getting some guys. Jimmy G might even get back in the next couple weeks, so they may be even better and become a little bit more consistent. But I just think if you're the Raiders, it's understandable to lose to the Niners to me, but you can't lose it. You're still, with all their injuries they have, you should be the better team. You're the team that's in playoff position. You're the team that needs these wins to compete and get in the playoffs and maybe even give you a chance to compete for the division, which now I think they've shown who they are enough to where it's like they're not going to compete for the division. I think Seattle's got that division because also Arizona loses a game, which is understandable to lose to the Pats. Belichick, he schemed it up. And the Pats, we know they've risen up and played some really good games. They haven't looked great the whole year.
Yep.
But they've risen up and played some good games against some good teams. So you understand it. But still, if you're Arizona, you got to win that game. You've got to win that game to solidify your playoff position. And then if you wanted to be in the talk to win the division, I think both Arizona and the Rams showed to me that Seattle still got control of that division, is going to take the division. But I was wanting to ask you, Dan, what's going on with your Cards, man? 2 in a row here. They're sliding.
Yeah, they are sliding. I don't really have much to say. You got to beat. If you're not going to beat New England in this season, then you might not beat them. I mean, there's not much there, and to get shut down on offense like that by a defense that's playing a bunch of backups, I give credit to Belichick.
It's a scheme, man.
It's a scheme, and then once he gets guys in there, but. They
rushed him the right way. That's why I was impressed, though, because not to interrupt you, but they did a good job of bottling up Kyler Murray and not letting him escape. That was the first time I've seen this year in a game that I've watched the Cardinals where he just didn't have anywhere to run.
It's the first team to really contain him.
And if you can do that, I mean, you can stop them because when he's not being a playmaker and being able to create,
this is kind of who I thought the Cardinals would be. 6-5 now. I mean, I know they got out to a little bit of a hot start and stuff, but I still just didn't see it for them this year. A little early to me.
It's this question that. Go ahead, Jody. Sorry.
I was just gonna say it could still be early. I mean, I know I'll let you touch up on whatever you want to with them as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's this thing with these teams that are like, improving and trying to turn the corner and become maybe upper echelon, like the Raiders, right? They come out and they played one of the most dominant games I've seen all year against the Saints, and we all think the Saints are like for real in the NFC. Yeah. But I mean, the Raiders just pushed them around and they totally, owned that game on the offense and defensive lines. And then they go and play against the Chiefs and play an amazing game, and then they lay an egg. And that's what teams that are young and are inexperienced, they do. They get up for the big games, they compete, and then when they go against Atlanta, and it's the same thing with the Cardinals. You got to beat certain teams if you're going to be good in this league. That's what the Seahawks do. That's what the Steelers do. And like Aggie said, it's not always pretty. Sometimes you lose. Sometimes you beat the Broncos 19-17, or it's not a huge blowout win, but you still win the game even when you're not playing your best. And these younger teams, these up and coming teams, like I would put the Raiders and the Cards kind of at the same spot, probably in coming along here. They just haven't learned that yet, and so in order for them to get to the next level, they might have to learn that hard lesson.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the Raiders that it really is baffling just because of the way they lost. But it kind of makes me look back to last year. They were 6-5 last year, and they ended up losing 4 out of 5 and going 1-4 down the stretch. And, and it was at the same time last year, I remember us talking about like they probably had one of the easiest schedules. They had a game against the Jets, the Broncos, the Chargers, and Jacksonville, and they lost 3 of those 4 games. And ended up missing the playoffs and went 7-9. And you wonder if that's kind of where they're headed now. Like they can't get it together. And it really is, like you said, Travis, the best teams, they got to play consistent. Like you don't have to get up for those games, and you don't have to play your best football to win. And, if that's the team that they are, then they probably won't be a real contender in the AFC, even though some people thought, midway through the season that they might be, just because they had that big win over the Saints and the Chiefs. But, when you play a game like that against Atlanta, and maybe it was, the definition of a trap game for them,
Yeah, it might be.
Game against Kansas City, and you underestimate the team. But I feel like, and you guys can comment on this, but I feel like in the NFL, you have to expect that any team can beat you any Sunday.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The one thing I wanted to say with the Cards losing, I looked at the Seahawks schedule, and like they're going to get to at least 12 wins. I'm pretty sure that's their division now to win. So I think we can almost. I don't want to be that guy that thinks that they couldn't lose, but the next 3 games are against teams that are just awful, and then they play 2 division games at the end against the Cards and the 49ers. I got to think they're getting to at least 12 wins, if not more. Yeah. So at this point, you got to say Seattle's probably going to win out that division, and could very well be competing for the number 1 seed, depending on how the season plays out.
Yep, it'll be interesting to see how that number 1 seed race plays out between Kansas City and Pittsburgh as well with their schedules, and then Seattle and the Saints, obviously. But I am personally interested to kind of see if Minnesota can find a way to sneak themselves in the conversation, because they are only 1 game back. But more football for us for the next week as well on the show. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, as well as subscribe on YouTube, and find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks for joining us, guys.